Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be an offlane tier list for patch 7.34c, and as always, I just look at the statistics and I try to make a pub list for kind of mid to lower tier pubs, not just for the higher, meta that's in like 10k or something, although I do base my tier list off of those statistics. I try to adjust it based on my opinion, based on what I'm seeing and what I feel is best for pubs. So anyway, let's just jump in to the S tier, and the number one hero all alone for S tier is Brewmaster. And that's because this hero is getting picked far and away more than any other hero in the top MMR, and it's just getting an insane win rate. It's like 55 to 60% or something like that, and it just feels broken right now. Now, I'm not a huge Brewmaster player, but I will say if you want to watch somebody that knows how to play it and plays a lot of it, go watch Monkeys Forever. He streams a bunch. He's been streaming a lot recently, and he plays this hero all the time. It's one of his favorite heroes. I think I recently heard him say that if it wasn't for this hero, he probably wouldn't be playing nearly as much Dota as he has for the past couple of years. He just loves this hero, and it's good to see how he plays. You could just download one of his replays too to see how he plays this hero. I think one of the biggest things is he's going Spirit Vessel, and with the way that Thunderclap and Cinder Brew and all these things work, I think he just does insane damage early, and then obviously this ultimate is just really, really effective for team fighting. It's hard to bring him down full to zero, and then he can pop this ultimate. You can push towers with it. You can do a lot of different things, and it scales pretty well into the later portion of the game. Also, I think the way this Drunken Brawler works now that they changed it a year or so ago, where you have the earth, the fire, the void, the storm, you have all these different things, and everything that it gives you versus with magic resistance and then evasion and all this stuff. I think there's a lot of potential in there that not many players have unlocked. And I think Monkeys Forever and some of these other players that have been spamming this hero have really started to use switching between all these things to the best of its ability. Because I think before people used to just leave it on whatever is the best for last hitting or whatever. But now people are changing it a lot. More like Invoker almost, depending on what you want to do at that very time, you have your different things active. That's kind of what this hero is doing. So it feels like he just has something for every situation now. It really feels like that. Now, there is the thing later in the game where your split can just die, and that can be kind of a problem. But again, you do have a lot of different ways to deal with that. I mean, you have your Cyclone, you have all these different things you can do, you have a ton of damage, and then your hero's just not a joke when you don't have your ult either. You are pretty tanky, and with all this damage that you're getting now, you're not just a pushover without ult. So that's Brewmaster. That's pretty much what the hero is, and I think it just dominates lanes now, and with the Spirit Vessel and all that stuff, it's just really good. Just go look up Monkeys Forever and how he plays it. I'm sure he has other things talking about that too, about how it is so good. But that's S tier right now. Brewmaster is very, very good. Next we have A tier, and these are all basically the S tier heroes that are not Brewmaster. First we have Dawnbreaker, and this hero was probably the S tier hero along with Brewmaster, or even above Brewmaster, and before Brewmaster became this S tier hero in this last patch. But then it got nerfed, I think, in the C patch, so it came down a little bit. It's still getting picked a lot. It's probably one of the only heroes that's getting picked semi close to Brewmaster level, but just not as good as it once was because it did get nerfed. That's why it's here. Otherwise, you could arguably still put Dawnbreaker up here. The only reason why I put her here is because she did get nerfed. I think she's kind of a little bit on the downtrend, but she's still very, very good in the off lane. I think the thing is you can get so much farm on the hero, and then because you're a mini Spectre kind of hero where you can just farm alone and be at every single team fight, that's so valuable with the map being this big. I think that's just really the long and short of it. Actually, yes, that's the other thing too. The ultimate now stunning through BKB is huge. I think those two things just make this hero very good. You reliably hit your ultimate and they are stunned, period. There's nothing they can do. And then the fact that you can just farm the whole map or anywhere on the map and still show up to every fight is just invaluable. Legion Commander is still very, very good. Not as good as she was probably S tier broken a few patches ago when this hero got changed and just felt like this was far and away the best hero. It's still very, very good for pubs, just not as broken as she once was because I think they nerfed her a little bit. But nothing really special to say about Legion. Just does the same thing Legion has been doing since they switched her abilities and made them a lot better. And now she just is very, very good still. Very good, reliable laning stage. You can dominate a lot of lanes, and then you're just a menace for supports and anybody trying to split push and get their farm. Now, the only problem with the hero is because the map is so big, it can be sometimes hard to hunt people when they're not really pushing lanes, or they're not a kind of hero that has to show in lane to push lanes. That can be somewhat difficult and annoying. But if you get some wards up in the jungle and stuff like that, you can still pick people off and find them. Then we have Slardar here. I think this hero is really, really good. The only problem is it has some matchup problems where it can just feel like it doesn't do much. I also think that a lot of people are picking the hero and tanking the win rate. So I think this hero is potentially S tier, but because like this hero seems like, oh, easy hero, you just bash, you minus armor, very good hero, amp up your carry's damage. People like pick it all the time. Like I see it in my pubs all the time, and I feel like it loses all the time. So I feel like people are just like, you know, if you're getting role queue games and you get an offlane game for whatever reason, because that happens sometimes because not a lot of people play offlane, everyone just picks Slardar and they just all lose on it. So I think that's just like tanking the win rate, and the win rate's still decent. So, but anyway, there's not much else to say about Slardar. I think it's just been buffed here and there over time. Like there's the water trail on the ultimate now that allows you to just chase people down more. There's all these little things about the puddles with your slithering crush, all the damage you can be doing, and it just all these little buffs over time just added up to make this hero extremely, extremely strong. Next, we have Primal Beast. Was very good when it came back into the meta, and then just got a little bit of nerfs, I think, and now it's kind of just okay. Or not okay, it's still very, very good, just not like broken like it was, where it's getting picked. But I already talked about Primal Beast in the mid-tier list. It's still very good from offlane as well, so I'm just going to put that there. Axe is one of these heroes that I'm glad to see in A tier. I can't remember where it was in the last tier list I did, but it's been kind of on the upswing. It's getting better. It's getting buffs, and it feels very powerful now. I think Axe is kind of like Slardar, where they're similar sorts of heroes where they have stuns and all these very good aspects, and they can do a lot of damage, but they also have like lane matchup problems. Sometimes with Axe, it feels like you can just dominate the lane. You can run after them. They can't do anything because you got your Vanguard early, and you can cut waves, and then you have insane farm. You're level 10 at like 10 minutes, and you have like 100 plus last hits. And there's other games where it feels like you literally can't walk up in the lane or you just literally die. And you can't get your Vanguard to like 6 minutes and blah, blah, blah. It just snowballs bad. But at least you can farm pretty quickly. You can farm the jungle. You can catch back up. And then you can always be a threat late game with that stun through BKB. So it's still very good. It just is matchup dependent, I think, sometimes like Slardar. Night Stalker. This hero is very good. It will just eat supports alive. And I think the biggest thing is that they changed how his abilities work with like nighttime, and I think popping his ultimate. So you can like use your abilities, and then you can pop ultimate. I believe that's how it is, and then you can recast your abilities. That's the biggest thing that I think brought this hero back into the meta. And then also with the shard, just being able to like eat a creep and get like half your HP or more back, that's really good too. So it's all these little things that just have added up over the last few patches that just make this hero very good right now. Still has very similar weaknesses. During the day, if you don't have your ultimate, you're a terrible hero. You don't do anything. But I feel like that's rarer now because I think they have shortened the cooldown on his ultimate, I believe, like in the last couple of years. So before, the ultimate, I think, was like very, very low in cooldown. And it also worked a little bit differently with like adjusting the day-night cycles. Doesn't really do that anymore. So this hero is very good, just similar weaknesses. First 5 minutes of the game also is very, very bad. So just got to make sure you're at least able to secure some lane for the first 5 minutes. Razor, very good offlane. This is a carry from the offlane, but you're not just like griefing the game with carry from the offlane with this hero. You are reliably getting your farm. You're dominating lanes. You don't necessarily push towers, but because you're so hard to fight into after like, 6, 7, 8 minutes, you can just dominate games and push towers because they're hard to like contest you. Very fast, hard to kill. Does a little bit of everything, and then it very, very good anti-carry. So with heroes like Sven and Troll being okay, a lot of heroes that just get up in your face, PA, this hero's very good against all of them because you have generally high armor. You're obviously sapping all of their damage, and it's very anti-carry in that way, where there's a lot of these big, hard-hitting carries this patch. Obviously, the biggest thing is that his passive got reworked, and now he can like farm and do a lot of stuff, more than just like, oh, passive give you move speed, most boring passive in the game. And then lastly, I'm still putting Beastmaster and Lycan here because their win rates are still pretty good. They're still getting picked very often, not as much as some of these other heroes, but they're still getting picked relatively recently or decently, relatively high amount of games, and their win rates are pretty good as well. I was debating putting them in B tier here, but I think they still deserve the A tier. I'll just say that. Now they are trending down, so they may be down here. Like in TI, we'll see if they get picked. I think one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to see no Beastmaster, no Lycan in TI at all. They're going to be terrible, or they're going to come back and be like, oh, wait, these heroes are actually still really broken. They just kind of were out of flavor. They just aren't the flavor of the month, if you want to say that. So that's A tier. Next, we're going to go to B tier. Tidehunter, pretty solid, pretty good. You know, if you can't pick one of these heroes, you feel like it's a bad game for some of these heroes, like a Slaughter or Axe, whatever, you can just pick Tide. It's very good, very reliable. The ult's still very good. I think the biggest thing that makes this hero good, though, is the Shard. The Shard is absolutely amazing. Now, the problem with it is it's very, very close range. You have to be like in melee range to cast it. But if you're able to do that, it counters like so many heroes. It's very hard to deal with. If they have high attack speed, yes, they can kill it pretty quickly. But if they don't, or you can disarm them or stun them, you know, it's very annoying to deal with, especially for supports or like a Zeus, for instance, that's not attacking very fast. It's like very annoying for that hero. Next, we have Darkseer. This hero was just really good. I had to admit in like the last tier list or a few patches ago that this hero was pretty broken. Thankfully, they've nerfed the hero, and I don't see it nearly as often now. It's still decent, but I think the big problem with this hero on any kind of like, in any mid to low MMR is that you're just giving everyone a free lane. I always say this, you're giving the carry a free lane, and that hasn't really changed. Now, obviously, you are going to get your reliable items, and if you go late game, this hero's very good, but everyone feels like they're getting their items these days. And so, I don't know, I think it's matchup dependent because you have to be able to have good vacuum wall combos that actually produce something. And that doesn't feel like that always happens these days. And I feel like there's a lot of heroes now that can take advantage of your bad laning stage. Bristleback, surprisingly, is on the up and up. I thought this hero, with the change to the Ags, was actually going to be pretty bad. It just didn't feel like the Ags... I don't like the old Ags, to be honest. Like, yes, it was good at times, but it just felt pretty boring. Like, you're just, like, spamming your abilities, and it's just... that doesn't do anything. It's just not skillful. You're just kind of spamming your abilities. It's just a weird style. So I'm kind of glad they got rid of it, because this thing is more of a skill shot with the Ags. And so it can be very, very broken in some games, but then some games it can feel like this does nothing. So I think that's the problem. It also can have some bad matchups as well. Like any break obviously just destroys the hero, but sometimes it just feels like even in lane, it's just like, I'm just buying a stick. I don't care about the Bristleback. He can't dive me. We have a lot of magic damage, what have you. And so keep that in mind. But if you can get the right game, you can just snowball over the game. You turn your back with Ags, you just like one-shot a support. Doom is very good in certain matchups again. It's a lot about matchups these days with some of these offlanes. That's why it's like Bristleback is not as good as like Slardar or Axe, because these guys just have better matchups where he just doesn't have as many good matchups. And then Doom is very matchup dependent against anybody that like requires healing to survive Doom. So like squishier targets, or like a troll, for instance. A troll's like hitting and just naturally going to lifesteal. And so it's not as big of a deal if he gets doomed. Or I think Slark would be a good one, right? Because he can't regen. Yeah, so Slark is a good one because even if you doom him, even if he goes into the trees, I don't think he regens at all. Where before, if you just like doomed a Slark, but he was able to run out of vision, like it didn't even matter. He didn't care. And so a lot of these different heroes that rely on regen to survive Doom, or like there's an Io on the team, or a Dazzle or something like that. That just doesn't matter anymore. And so Doom's very good in those scenarios. I think in every other scenario, it's not nearly as good as it was. But if to counter regen specifically, it's pretty cool if there's another hero other than AA to do that. And next we have Chaos Knight. This is the last of, like, I think all these heroes are more typical, traditional offlanes. And then we have Chaos Knight, who's a carry from the offlane. The reason why I put this hero here is because it has a pretty high win rate, not being picked a ton, but I am spamming the hero. I may actually put my win rate up here for you to see. I think I've won like 25 out of 30 games or something with the hero. I am just dominating with this hero. I think this hero is insane. I think you reliably get your farm, carry or offlane. You're just going to get your farm. You have a good laning stage. With a lot of partners, you have the stun, you have a repositioning skill. It's hard to harass you out of lane because you have high strength, high damage, and you have this lifesteal / crit that you just get pretty early on. You just like max it. And then like, if your lane ever goes semi-poorly, you just don't even care. You just push the lane out, go jungle. Like you can literally jungle level 4 on this hero. So it's just reliable. And then you are going to get this timing, which is Armlet, Echo Saber, Heart. And you can get that anywhere between 18 to 23-ish minutes. And you're going to get that almost every game if you know what you're doing and you're focusing on farming. But you can also participate. Don't get me wrong. You can participate. But there's a lot of farming in this meta. And once you hit that timing, there's just nothing anybody can do. You have like 4k HP and you do ridiculous damage. Like you one-shot anyone, like in one stun, you just one-shot anybody in the entire game. And then later in the game, you scale insanely well. because you eventually get like 6k HP, you do insane damage, and it's hard to clear your illusions. It's just so many different things about the hero I think that are very good right now. Don't tell anybody though, because I don't want them to nerf it. I don't want it to get too popular because I'm just spamming this and I'm like destroying with it. I'm a couple games away from 5k MMR. I think over the next few months, if they don't nerf this hero and it doesn't get found out to be broken, which I think it is, that's why I'm only putting a B as like a sleeper pick. It's like, don't tell anybody. I think it's S tier. But I'm probably easily going to get Immortal if I keep this win rate up in the next couple months. Anyway, that's Chaos Knight, my favorite hero right now, which is absolute beast. And I think the lower MMR you go, the better he is too, because like people just can't deal with illusions, and 6k HP illusions at that. Then we have Pango, really good mid, not as good as an offlane. It just has more weaknesses. Like if you're not getting your items, if you have to play 2-up aggressive and like, you know, they can just track you down after using Swashbuckle. There's all these little things about the lane and the side lanes that he doesn't like nearly as much. Vengeful Spirit I think is more of a support, but you can still play it core and it's still pretty good because of the Ags. Like there are some games where getting Ags on this hero early, you just dominate the game, and it's just like feels like there's nothing the enemy can do because you just have this free life. You're running in, you're stunning people, you're casting your Wave of Terror, which is like minus armor and minus damage and all these little things. Now, they did nerf the hero because I think it was absolutely broken a couple patches ago. But so it's not nearly as good, but it's still very reliable. And then Visage, more of an offlaner than a mid. That's what I said in the mid tier list. So it's a pretty good offlaner, but again, a weird hero that nobody picks. And I think it's just like semi-viable if you are a Visage player. But it's not like broken like it was like a couple TIs ago or whatever when Tundra, I think, was spamming it. I think it was last TI maybe. But that was when the Wraith Pact was a thing. It was just kind of stupid, but just kind of middle of the pack cheese tier hero. Next we have C tier. These are all pretty semi-viable, just not great. Sand King is the sad one because he was like probably S tier, at least A tier a few patches ago, and then they just nerfed him immediately after he got buffed. It was the patch when it was like him and Bricky and PA and like all these heroes got a lot of buffs, and like everyone was picking Sand King, and this hero was dead for a long time, especially ever since the dust change, and they immediately nerfed the crap out of him. I think he's still okay. He's C tier because he's still semi-viable, where I think before he was like F tier. He was just awful. So the buffs were enough to make him decent. Like you can move the Sandstorm now, which is pretty cool. But then everything else, they just made all the little numbers worse. So it just feels really bad. I hate to see that because I want to see more of this hero. It's kind of an exciting hero to see, but unfortunately just not great right now. We'll see if it's actually still good despite all the nerfs, and it comes around in TI and people say, hey, Sand King's actually good, but I just don't think that's going to happen. Wind Ranger, if this hero's still viable, it's from the offlane. Because you don't really love it mid. Support, it's kind of just trash. Offlane, it still feels like you can kind of get away with playing carry Wind Ranger from the offlane, but kind of, I don't know. It may deserve D tier. It's one of those heroes that like the win rate's okay, the pick rate's decent enough to give it C tier, but I was kind of debating putting it in D, but I'm just saying, okay, it's okay. I don't see it a lot, but it's still decent from the offlane. Veno, it's one of these heroes that's at a weird spot. It's always at a weird spot because you don't love having Veno as a support because you kind of want items on the hero, and you don't love that it doesn't have a stun, even if it dominates earlier on in the game. And then from the offlane, you can really dominate the early portion of the game and push towers pretty well, but then it just kind of falls off and you feel like you're another support. So it's like in both ways, it just has this weird identity crisis where it's like, is it an offlane, is it a core, or is it a support? And it just feels like it doesn't do either very well. And I think until they patch this hero to make it one or the other, it's just going to always be at most like B or C tier, which is kind of where it's at right now. Timbersaw, similar thing to the mid tier list. I think it's more viable as an offlaner, but it's still at the C tier. It's still okay, definitely pickable, but not great. Omni Knight, decent. I think this hero has potential to be very good, especially with the change, kind of giving him back BKB, sort of. I've seen him absolutely blow people up with his pure damage in some games, but he's just rarely picked. I think the biggest problem is Nullifier. Nullifier just owns this hero. Dispels just own this hero, and there's a lot more of them these days than maybe there used to be. Nullifier used to not even be an item. And so I think that's the big problem. It's kind of like Necro over here, which is the next one, is just like these heroes just get so owned by Nullifier, and so many different heroes love buying a Nullifier right now. Like so many carries can just buy a Nullifier, like even third item these days. Where Nullifier used to always feel like a late game 6 item kind of thing, or 5th item at earliest. Now it's like, dude, you could even buy it. I've never really seen its 2nd item. Like, that never happens. But 3rd item, definitely for sure. Like, you can definitely buy a 3rd item on a lot of heroes. So that's why both these heroes just get owned. Now, lower MMR you go, the worse people are, the less often people buy Nullifier. The less often people know how to use their dispels. And that's when these heroes can just own. Pudge, from the mid or the off lane, is the only real 2 viable ways to play the hero. You can snowball the game, and then sometimes you can be a support, just like I said for the mid Pudge. So it's a very all or nothing kind of game with that hero. Death Prophet, best from an off lane position right now. You can dominate some games, and then I think from the off lane, the real thing is that you don't feel like it's a big deal if you waste your ult, because you still have a mid, you still have a carry, you still have a forward position with a big ultimate potentially. These other things where it's like, if you waste your ult as a mid or something like that, it feels like, oh, that's terrible. And this hero doesn't really play support that well. So it's just like, it's at a very awkward spot, but offlane, it can definitely be good against some matchups. But then anti-healing from Doom and stuff like that, I think that is one of the biggest counters, obviously. But with Doom having that change, it's just harder to pick Death Prophet now. Even though people don't pick Doom that much, I think it's still picked enough that it's hard to pick this hero. Viper, same problem as the mid Viper. Very slow. People just don't care about the fact that you dominate the lane anymore. There's a lot of ranged heroes now, or a lot of heroes that can just go jungle early on. Like, there's so many jungle camps now that, like, they can just soak XP to level 4 or 5, a lot of these carries, and then just be like, okay, whatever, I'm just going to go hit the camps. And you're such a slow hero, you're not going to go hunt them down to the camps. You're just going to, like, push the wave, and then, you know, maybe they'll come back for a wave or two, and then go back into the jungle. And it's just, there's nothing you can do about it. And then, just, okay, now you have an offlane Viper. Great. Fantastic. That's terrible. Again, you can still stop with it in low MR pubs, but other than that, it just feels pretty bad. But semi-viable, still pickable, that's why it's C. Then Spirit Breaker is one of these heroes that feels like you can dominate the game and you can just be super annoying all over the map, ganking people constantly, but it has a problem where if you're not seeing people on the map to gank, or you don't have teammates that want to gank with you, or you can't get these solo kills from the off lane, it just feels like, oh, I'd rather be a 4. So you really want to be snowballing with this hero. It's actually kind of similar to Pudge in that way. It's like you're this tanky hero, low cooldown spells. You want to constantly be running around the map, getting kills. Obviously, Pudge is amping up his passive. You don't do that with this hero, but you're getting gold. Your abilities get even better with more movement speed and all this stuff. But if it feels like a passive game, which a lot of these games are going late, passive, farming in the jungle, it feels like, oh, well, no one's showing in the waves. I can't really charge anybody. And what are you going to do as a Spirit Breaker? Like, you just kind of hit the jungle? I mean, I know you can charge waves and kill them pretty quickly now, but it just doesn't feel that great. But it's still pretty viable, because I think the thing that makes this hero viable is that you can charge those waves. And you can reliably kind of clear waves. Now, but you have to commit your hero, and then people know that you're not charging them. So that's kind of the problem with the hero. And because it's such a passive, farm-heavy game in the jungle, there's games where it just feels like the hero does nothing. Then the last of semi-viable, decent heroes that you can pick in some games and not completely grief, we have Mars, who just has an awful win rate. This hero seems like it's always had an awful win rate, but it's just worse than ever right now. But you can still pick it. It is a classic off-lane hero that, you know, Arena can never be counted out, and it can still do a lot of damage. The spear with the shard is still very good to pin 2 people. There's still very good things about the hero. It just feels like for 5 years, this hero's been nothing but nerfed. Maybe it receives a buff here and there, but it's not enough to bring it back with a win rate above like 50%. It's like never had a win rate above 50%, but people love playing it. It's kind of like Pudge in this way, where people love playing it. They pick it so much, they don't care if it has a low win rate, but it's just got to be put down here because its win rate is so bad right now. Centaur, it's just sad to see this hero down here. It feels like, you know, Axe and Slardar and all these other heroes that are like your traditional offlaners, they've all gotten buffs. Like even Sand King had his, you know, 30 seconds of fame. It was like 2 days that this hero was like S tier or whatever, but it got nerfed. But at least it's not that bad still. It's semi-viable, and no matter what they seem to do to Centaur, you know, they changed the stuns. You can like walk while stunning with the animation, and they do all these little buffs to it. It just feels like, okay, you're a hero with like 5-6k HP and you have a stun, but who cares? Like, the thing about this hero is you could pick this hero or you could pick CK. You know what I mean? Like, these heroes both have insane HP. They both have a stun. This hero has illusions, a crit, lifesteal, a minus armor ability, a relocation ability. Like, it has everything, all this other stuff. This guy's tanky, has a stun, and then, like, I guess, like, you press R every once in a while and people run fast, but, like, whatever, dude. Who cares? Really, the problem is that it doesn't do anything else. And so you're so tanky, but you don't do enough damage. I think that's the thing with this hero. They need to give him more damage because you can just ignore Centaur. If there's a Centaur on the enemy team, just pretend there's not, and then you win the game, basically. Because he's like, oh, guys, I'm so tanky, and then I stun once, and I use my ability, and now I just don't, I walk around the fight and don't do anything. And it just feels really bad. Dragon Knight, I don't know. It's just in an awkward spot. All the numbers are too low, I think. And then even if you get your farm, which you don't want to be just like farming on a Dragon Knight, it just feels like, okay, I don't really care that you have a Dragon Knight with Ags anymore. Like, it just feels like I can break the hero with all these breaks in the game now. Especially, like, I think I always keep going back to carry PA, and PA being very good as, like, breaking a Centaur, breaking a Mars with the Shard, and, like, breaking a Dragon Knight, jumping and just blowing him up, breaking that high armor that he has. I think that's, like, a big reason with all these breaks, or these heroes that can buy breaks that just destroy these heroes. Marcy feels like more of a support with the way they changed and buffed the hero with the lifesteal and stuff. Semi-viable as an offlane, but not a great core right now. I think Marcy's at the worst spot that it's ever been, or at least it was before the change. Now it might be more viable as a support, but it just doesn't feel great right now. Magnus is probably best from the offlane. It's not like this carry hero like it was when the universal heroes were broken. It's more of just like the old classic, the old classic Magnus in a couple TIs ago with, oh my goodness, why am I forgetting his name? Oh my goodness, what am I thinking, dude? Team Spirit, Collapse. I don't know why I was thinking Universe Magnus. What am I thinking? Anyway, Collapse Magnus with the jumping in, the skewering back, the horn toss, the ultimate. That's what this hero's all about. And like maybe buffing up your carry, but that doesn't matter as much. You're still going to get your reliable farm. The Ags is a little bit better now, so it just feels like this hero is more of like a magic damage control hero, which is pretty good. That's why it's semi-viable still, but it's not that damage dealing hero. Tusk, kind of an awkward off lane, feels like more of a 4 position. The problem is you don't farm with the hero. If you need to hit creeps, it just doesn't feel great. Now, yeah, you can spam your snowball and your ice shards to clear waves and stuff, but you don't jungle that great. Enigma, pretty much dead. Since they changed how the laning stage worked, this hero's a trash laner now. And so, yes, you can get your farm, but you're just so bad in lane. You're like worse than Darkseer in terms of just giving people a free lane. Like, it's absolutely atrocious. And so I think it's going to be down here until they give it some more buffs. But I don't think they're going to buff it anytime soon because it was so broken for so long. Phoenix, just a better support. You could potentially get away with it in a very, very good game where people can't kill the egg from off lane. But it's like, dude, you just might as well be a support. Like, because if they can kill the egg and you're wasting that core position, that 3 position on this hero, it just is not good. And you don't farm very well. Like, that's the other thing with like a Tusk or like a Phoenix. You're just not a good jungler. You can maybe push waves okay, but you need those items. And from the offlane, it just feels like a waste when all these other heroes are going to get more farm than you. Huskar, not really an offlane, but you could potentially play it. It's okay. I mean, you can pick more of these carries from the offlane. So I think this could be on the uptrend. It just doesn't feel like the best Huskar patch, but just a decent Huskar patch. And then Broodmother, not very good right now. Still a cheese pick. Is okay. Was broken a few months ago, but they've recently nerfed it a lot. So thank goodness. Nobody likes to see Broodmother at all. Then lastly, we have this tiny tier here. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. Let's try that. There we go. Now it's on par with everything else. The F tier. These heroes are either not offlane or absolutely atrocious. Batrider has like a 30% win rate. Absolutely atrocious. Same thing with Underlord. Horrible, horrible win rate right now. Just, I don't know what happened to this hero. It felt like it was kind of coming back into the meta a little bit. I don't even think they nerfed it that hard. Like, maybe they did this a little bit, but it just destroyed the hero. The hero literally has a 30% win rate. It's awful. Same thing with Bounty Hunter, just like fell off a cliff in terms of offlane. Pretty good support, I'd say. It just, you don't love the hero offlane. Like, what does it do from an offlane? It does the same thing as it does from the support, so just pick it as a support. Nature's Prophet, just more of a support. You could play this hero carry or offlane. Like, you could, but again, you're going to do the same thing from the support, so just pick it support. That's the same thing with Nyx Assassin. It's a support. Just play it as a 4 position. Same thing with Wind Wyvern. Has not been a core since the Universal Hero nerf. And then same thing with Snapfire. Universal Hero nerfed. And then also this hero was like just dumpstered after the last patch when it was just like one-shotting people with its 25 and 20 talent. and Daedalus and stuff, they kind of nerfed that very, very heavily, like a lot. And now it just is not a core anymore. Maybe that'll come back eventually in the future if they buff it, but right now it's just absolutely dead, so do not pick this hero core. Even as a support, it's not very good. This is the worst I think Snapfire's been in probably forever, but definitely a long time. So that is my offlane tier list for patch 7.34c. As always, guys, let me know in the comments what you think, if you agree, disagree, what you think should be different, and maybe let me know what you think is going to happen in TI. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. If you like the video, make sure to tune in to my next one, and as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.